The night my wife hid me behind a plant at her company gala, the new CEO walked past her, took my hands, and said he'd been searching for me for 30 years. When Vivian pointed to the spot behind the potted ferns and told me to stay there like a dog waiting for its owner, I should have walked out, but I'd been following her orders for 22 years. My body obeyed before my brain could object. "Don't wander," she said, smoothing her burgundy gown, the one that cost more than I was allowed to spend in 6 months. "I need to make connections tonight. The acquisition changes everything." She meant Hargrove Technologies had been bought out by Cross Ventures, and the new CEO would be at this gala, her last chance to salvage a career that had been circling the drain for years. "Should I started. "No," she cut me off without looking at me. "You shouldn't do anything except stand exactly where I put you and try not to look so." She waved her hand vaguely at my entire existence. I was wearing a suit from a discount outlet, $48, marked down from $120. Vivian's gown cost $4,000. The math of our marriage right there. I watched her walk away, shoulders back, forcing confidence she didn't feel. 22 years. I met Vivian Hargrove when I was 26 and she was 39. I was a graphic designer struggling to pay rent, working freelance jobs that barely covered groceries. She was already established, senior VP at a tech company, power suits and corner office, the kind of woman who walked into rooms and people listened. She told me I had potential, that she could help me, that I should move in with her, save money, focus on building my portfolio while she handled the bills. It sounded like partnership. It wasn't. Within 6 months, she'd convinced me to close my freelance accounts. Too much stress, she said. Within a year, she'd moved us into a house where only her name appeared on the deed. Within 2 years, I stopped checking our joint bank account because the only money going in was hers, and the only money I could take out was the $200 monthly allowance she gave me for personal expenses. 22 years of don't embarrass me. 22 years of stay in the background. 22 years of becoming smaller and smaller until I barely recognized myself. The ballroom was crystal and marble, the kind of place where wealth was assumed and displayed casually. I stood half hidden by the plants, watching executives network with the intensity of sharks circling prey. Vivian had positioned me in the shadows deliberately, out of sight, close enough to retrieve if needed, far enough away that no one would associate me with her. I'd learned not to feel anything about it anymore. Numbness was easier. 20 minutes passed, then the energy in the room shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned toward the entrance. A man walked in, and the entire ballroom seemed to recalibrate around him. He was tall, late 40s, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, perfectly tailored charcoal suit, but it wasn't the clothes. It was the way he moved, calm, centered, like he knew exactly who he was and didn't need to prove it to anyone. "That's him," someone whispered nearby. "Dominic Cross, the new CEO." Dominic. The name hit me like a fist to the sternum. No, it couldn't be. But when he turned, scanning the crowd with those gray eyes I'd memorized 30 years ago, there was no doubt. Dominic Cross, the boy I'd loved when I was 19. The man I'd been forced to walk away from when Vivian's father found out and threatened to destroy both our lives. My hands started shaking. I pressed deeper into the shadows, heart hammering against my ribs. He was older now, lines around his eyes, silver in his hair, the softness of youth replaced with something harder and more certain. But the shape of his face was the same, the way he held himself, the slight tilt of his head when he listened to someone speak. Dominic, my Dominic. Except he wasn't mine, hadn't been for 3 decades. Across the room, Vivian saw him. Her expression shifted instantly, desperation masked as confidence. She cut through the crowd like a blade, hand already extended for the handshake that could save her career. I watched her reach him, watched her smile stretch too wide, watched her launch into whatever pitch she'd rehearsed. Dominic accepted the handshake politely, but he wasn't looking at her. He was scanning the room, searching. Then his gaze found mine. The world stopped. He froze mid-sentence, whatever Vivian was saying to him completely forgotten. His face went pale, his lips parted in shock. For 3 seconds, we just stared at each other across 50 feet of marble floor in 22 years of silence. Then he moved. He walked away from Vivian without a word, cutting through the crowd like nothing else existed. People stepped aside instinctively. They could feel it, something huge and unstoppable happening. Vivian kept talking for several seconds before she realized her audience had left. She turned, confused, following Dominic's trajectory. When she saw where he was headed, her face went white. Dominic stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, different than I remembered, more expensive, but somehow still him. "Adrian," he said, my name in his voice after all these years. I couldn't breathe. "Dominic," I whispered. He reached for my hands without hesitation. His palms were warm and steady and familiar in a way that made my chest ache. I glanced at his ring finger automatically. "Bear, I've been looking for you for 28 years, he said, voice rough. The ballroom had gone completely silent, every single person watching us. I never stopped. Behind me, I heard the sharp crack of glass hitting marble. Vivian had dropped her champagne flute. "This is absurd," Vivian snapped, pushing between us, face flushed red with humiliation. "Adrian, what the hell is going on?" Dominic didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on mine. "Could we talk?" he asked gently. "Privately?" "Privately?" Vivian's voice went shrill. "He's my husband. Anything Anything you need to say? No, Dominic said quietly. I can't do this in front of an audience. He pulled a business card from his jacket and pressed it into my palm. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. A deliberate touch. Please, he said. Call me. We need to talk. Vivian grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. We're leaving, she announced. Now. Dominic's expression darkened when he saw her grip. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not here. Not now. Don't make this worse. He stepped back, but when he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the silent ballroom. Adrian, I hired an investigator 6 months ago. When I found out you were married, I almost walked away, until I learned what your wife has been doing to you for 2 decades. The crowd gasped. Vivian's face went from red to white in an instant. Financial control, Dominic continued, calm and surgical. Isolation from friends and family. A monthly allowance of $200 while she spends thousands on herself. A prenuptial agreement you signed under duress that leaves you with nothing if you divorce. My stomach dropped. How did he know? I'm offering you a position at Cross Ventures, Dominic said. Director of Creative Strategy. $95,000 annually, full benefits, relocation assistance if you need it. You'll never need her permission or her money again. The whispers erupted like wildfire. Vivian's carefully constructed image, the powerful executive, the successful businesswoman, crumbling in front of every colleague she'd spent the night trying to impress. Dominic looked directly at Vivian for the first time. And if Adrian chooses to leave you, my legal team will ensure he gets exactly what he deserves from this marriage. Every manipulation, every controlling behavior, every instance of financial abuse, we have documentation. Vivian's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Dominic turned back to me, his expression softening. The offer stands for as long as you need, he said. But please, don't disappear on me again. Vivian yanked me toward the exit, nails digging into my arm through my jacket. I stumbled after her, clutching Dominic's business card like a lifeline, while behind us the ballroom erupted in shocked conversation. The car ride home was silent. Vivian's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, Dominic's card hidden in my pocket, trying to process what had just happened. When we got home, Vivian went straight to the kitchen and poured herself 3 fingers of scotch, drank it in one swallow, poured another. You're not calling him, she said finally. Whatever that was, it's over. I didn't respond. Adrian, her voice went sharp. I said you're not calling him. I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in years. The woman who'd convinced me I couldn't survive without her. The woman who'd slowly, methodically stripped away every piece of independence I had until I believed I was nothing. I know what you did, I said quietly. She froze. When I was 26 and dating Dominic, your father found out. He threatened to ruin Dominic's scholarship, get him expelled from university, destroy his future, and he told me if I didn't walk away and never contact Dominic again, he'd make sure it happened. Vivian set down her glass very carefully. I was young and terrified, I continued, so I did what he wanted. Broke up with Dominic without explanation. Let him think I just stopped loving him. And 2 months later, you showed up at my apartment with job offers and promises and a way out of poverty. That's ancient history, Vivian said. You knew, I said. You knew your father destroyed the only relationship that ever mattered to me, and you used it. You swooped in when I was broken and convinced me you were saving me. I did save you. You were nobody. Nothing. I gave you a life. You gave me a cage. The words hung in the air between us. Vivian's face twisted. You think he actually wants you, she hissed. A 49-year-old man with no career, no savings, no independence? You think that job offer is real? I think he spent 28 years looking for me. He's successful now. Rich. He could have anyone. Why would he want you? I pulled Dominic's card from my pocket. Looked at it. The raised lettering. The direct line. I guess I'll find out, I said, and I walked upstairs before she could respond. I didn't sleep that night, just lay in the guest room. I'd been sleeping separately from Vivian for 3 years, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Dominic's face when he saw me, the way he said my name. I've been looking for you for 28 years. At 3:47 a.m., I pulled out my phone and stared at his business card. My thumb hovered over the keypad. Vivian's voice echoed in my head. You're nothing without me. But Dominic's voice was louder. You'll never need her permission again. I sent a text before I could second guess myself. This is Adrian. We need to talk. The reply came 90 seconds later. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. I'll send a car. I set the phone down, hands shaking. For the first time in 22 years, I'd made a decision without asking Vivian's permission. It felt like stepping off a cliff, or maybe like finally learning to fly. The car arrived at 9:30 a.m., a black sedan with a driver who opened the door for me and didn't ask questions. Vivian was still asleep, or pretending to be. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Out, back later. Not asking permission, just informing. Cross Ventures occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that screamed quiet, competent wealth. A woman in her 30s met me immediately. Mr. Hayes, I'm Rebecca Thornton, Mr. Cross's executive assistant. He's expecting you. She led me through hallways lined with abstract art and floor-to-ceiling windows. Employees looked up as we passed, then quickly looked away. They knew who I was, or at least they knew I was someone important enough to merit Dominic's personal attention. Rebecca knocked once on a massive wooden door, then opened it. "Mr. Hayes, sir." Dominic stood up from behind his desk. The morning light caught the silver in his hair, made him look almost ethereal. "Thank you, Rebecca. Hold all calls." She nodded and closed the door behind me. We were alone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Dominic crossed the space between us in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms. I froze for half a second, then collapsed against him. He smelled like cedar and coffee and something indefinable that was just him. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner." My eyes burned. I hadn't cried in years. Vivian said tears were manipulation, but now I couldn't stop. Dominic just held me, one hand rubbing slow circles on my back, letting me break apart in his arms. When I finally pulled away, he led me to the couch by the window, sat close enough that our knees touched. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I told him about Vivian's father, the threats, how I'd walked away from Dominic to protect him, how Vivian had shown up 2 months later like a savior, the slow erosion of my independence, the prenup I'd signed because I was 27 and broke and she convinced me it was just a formality, the allowance, the isolation, the way she'd systematically cut me off from anyone who might have helped me leave. Dominic listened without interrupting, but his jaw got tighter and tighter. "I hired an investigator in February," he said when I finished. "After I sold my first company and had the resources to finally search for you properly. His name is Trevor Nakamura, 15 years in private investigation, former police detective. He found you in 6 weeks." He pulled a folder from his desk, set it on the coffee table between us. "Everything's in here. Bank records showing the financial control. Statements from people who tried to stay in touch with you but were blocked by Vivian. Screenshots of social media accounts she created in your name without your knowledge to make it look like you were fine." I stared at the folder. "The prenup," Dominic continued, "was signed under what my lawyer, Patricia Frost, 22 years of family law, calls unconscionable circumstances. You were financially vulnerable, had no legal representation, and the terms were grossly one-sided. It won't hold up in court." My hands were shaking. "Why?" I asked. "Why go to all this trouble?" Dominic looked at me like I'd asked why the sun rose. "Because I loved you. Because I never stopped. Because when you disappeared, I spent 5 years trying to find you before I finally accepted you were gone. And then I spent the next 23 years building a life that felt empty because you weren't in it." He took my hands. "I never married, never even came close. Everyone I dated, I compared to you, and they all fell short." I couldn't speak, couldn't process that this man, this impossibly successful, powerful man, had spent nearly 3 decades thinking about me. "The job offer is real," Dominic said. "Director of Creative Strategy. You'd be working with our marketing and design teams, helping shape how we present ourselves to the world. I've seen your early portfolio work. Trevor found it, and you were brilliant. You could be again. I haven't worked in 20 years, so we'll train you, invest in you. You'll have a team, resources, time to rebuild your skills. And if I'm terrible at it," Dominic smiled, sad and gentle, "then we'll find something else you're good at. The point isn't the job, Adrian. The point is freedom. The point is proving to you that you can exist without her controlling every aspect of your life." I met with Patricia Frost that afternoon. She was exactly what Dominic had promised. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, the kind of lawyer who probably won more cases through sheer intimidation than actual argument. "Mr. Hayes," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "I've reviewed your prenuptial agreement. It's one of the most lopsided documents I've seen in 22 years of practice." She spread the papers across her conference table. "You waive all rights to marital property acquired during the marriage. You waive spousal support. You waive claims to retirement accounts, investments, or business assets, and in exchange you receive—" She looked up at me. "Absolutely nothing. Vivian said it was standard." "Mr. Hayes, this isn't standard. This is financial imprisonment, and the circumstances under which you signed it, no lawyer present, no time to review, significant power imbalance, make it unconscionable under state law." She pulled out another document. "I've prepared divorce filings. Community property laws in this state mean you're entitled to half of everything acquired during your marriage. The house, investments, her retirement accounts, all of it." My stomach churned. "She'll fight it. Of course she will. That's why I'm very good at my job." Patricia leaned forward. "I also want to discuss applying for an interim support order. Given the financial dependence she's created, the court can require her to pay you temporary support while the divorce is pending. Enough to rent an apartment, buy food, live independently. How much? Based on her income and the length of your marriage, probably $3,000 to $4,000 a month." I felt dizzy. $4,000 a month. 20 times what Vivian allowed me. "There's one more thing," Patricia said carefully. "Mr. Cross mentioned you might need a restraining order. I'm not being abused. Financial control is abuse, Mr. Hayes. Isolation is abuse. Verbal degradation is abuse. You don't need to be hit for it to count." She slid a form across the table. "This is a petition for a domestic violence restraining order based on economic abuse and emotional harm. If granted, she can't contact you, can't harass you, and has to stay at least 100 yards away." I stared at the form. The words domestic violence felt too big, too serious. "I need to think about it," I said. Patricia nodded. "Take your time." "But Adrian, and I'm speaking as someone who's seen 1,000 1,000 cases like yours, the moment you file for divorce, she's going to escalate. Financially, emotionally, legally. People who build their identity around control don't let go easily. I went back to the house that night because I had nowhere else to go. Vivian was waiting in the living room, perfectly composed. "So," she said, "did you see him?" "Yes." "And?" "I pulled the divorce papers from my bag, set them on the coffee table. I'm leaving." Vivian laughed. Actually laughed. "With what money, Adrian? You have $200 to your name. You can't even rent a hotel room." Dominic's offered me a job. A pity job. He feels guilty about whatever teenage romance you had. It'll last 3 months, maybe 6. Then he'll realize you're a middle-aged man with no skills, no network, no value, and you'll come crawling back. I'd heard variations of this speech for 2 decades, but this time, it didn't land. This time, I had documentation. I had lawyers. I had someone who'd spent 28 years looking for me. "Patricia Frost will be serving you official papers within the week," I said. "I'm entitled to half of everything we've acquired during this marriage. The house, your retirement accounts, your investments, and the prenup you made me sign isn't worth the paper it's printed on." Vivian's smile faltered. "You can't afford a lawyer." "I don't need to. Dominic's paying for it." You can't." "I can, and I am." I stood up. "I'll be out by tomorrow. If you try to contact me, threaten me, or interfere with the divorce in any way, Patricia will file for a restraining order, and then everyone will know exactly what you've been doing to me for 22 years. Vivian's face went white, then red, then something ugly twisted across her features. "You're nothing," she hissed. "You've always been nothing. I gave you a life, a home, stability, and this is how you repay me? You gave me a cage. You needed a cage. You were pathetic when I met you. Broke, directionless, clinging to some fantasy about a boy who would have left you the moment something better came along. I saved you." "No," I said. "You broke me. Systematically, deliberately, over 22 years. And I let you because I believed I deserved it." I picked up my bag. "I don't believe that anymore." Dominic sent movers the next day. Professional, efficient men who packed my few possessions in under 2 hours. Vivian stayed locked in her bedroom, refusing to come out. The temporary apartment Dominic had arranged was in a modern building downtown. 1 bedroom, furnished, a view of the city that made my chest ache because I'd forgotten what it felt like to see the sky without asking permission. Rebecca showed me around, pointing out the fully stocked kitchen, the internet password, the building's amenities. "Mr. Cross wanted you to have everything you need," she said. "If there's anything missing, just let me know." After she left, I stood in the middle of the living room and cried for the second time in 2 days. Not sad tears, relief tears, freedom tears. The divorce took 8 months. Vivian fought everything, claimed I was mentally unstable, claimed Dominic had manipulated me, claimed the marriage had been happy until he showed up and poisoned me against her. Patricia demolished every argument with documentation and depositions. She brought in a therapist, Dr. Elena Cardoso, licensed psychologist with a specialty in domestic abuse, who evaluated me and testified that I showed clear signs of long-term psychological trauma from financial and emotional control. She brought in Trevor Nakamura, the private investigator, who presented evidence of Vivian's father's threats 30 years ago and how Vivian had knowingly capitalized on my vulnerability. She brought in bank records, credit card statements, witnesses who testified they'd tried to maintain friendships with me, but Vivian had systematically blocked them. The judge awarded me 52% of marital assets. The house, which I immediately sold and split with Vivian per the settlement, half her retirement accounts, half her investment portfolio, and 12 months of rehabilitative spousal support at $4,000 per month to help me rebuild my career. When the final papers were signed, Patricia shook my hand and said, "You did good, Adrian. You got out. A lot of people in your situation never do." The job at Cross Ventures turned out to be real, not a pity offering, not charity. Dominic meant every word. I started slowly, relearning software I hadn't touched in 20 years, working with patient team members who treated me like a professional, not a charity case. My first major campaign was for a nonprofit partnership Cross Ventures was funding. I designed the visual identity, wrote the copy, built the presentation deck. When I presented it to Dominic and the board, my hands shook so badly I could barely advance the slides, but they loved it. Dominic caught my eye across the conference table and smiled like I'd just handed him the sun. 6 months into the job, I got a small promotion. A year in, I was leading projects on my own. Slowly, painfully, I was becoming someone I recognized again. Dominic and I didn't rush into anything. We had coffee once a week at first, then dinner, then weekends where we'd just exist in the same space, reading or talking or sitting in comfortable silence, relearning each other, discovering who we'd become in 3 decades apart. "I thought about you every day," Dominic told me one night in his penthouse apartment, both of us on the couch with wine and the city lights spread below us. "Every major milestone, every success, every moment that should have been perfect, you were the missing piece." "I'm different now," I said. "Older, damaged. We're both different, and maybe that's okay." He set down his wine and took my hand. "I fell in love with you when you were 19 and fearless and full of dreams. I fell in love with you again at 49 when I watched you stand up to the woman who'd controlled you for 2 decades and choose yourself." My eyes burned. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. how to be in a relationship where I'm not constantly afraid. We'll figure it out together.